All right, we are live with Alexander Mercouris in London, and we are happy to have with us once again on the Duran, the one and only Larry Johnson. Larry, thank you for joining us. How are you doing? And
Always an honor.
All right, and where can people follow your work?
Sonar21.com. Very
All
simple.
right. Very simple. That link is in the description box down below, and I will add it as a pinned comment as well. And thank you to everyone that is watching us on Rockfin, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and to the locals community, the Duran.locals.com. A big shout out to our moderators as well. And Alexander, Larry, we have a lot of ground to cover because we are living in interesting times and dangerous times. And we can go from Pam Bondi's testimony to hearing all the way to Iran, to Ukraine, Venezuela. I leave it up to both of you to see where this live stream goes. So Alexander, Larry, the floor is yours.
Well, let's first of all, can I just say it's great again to have Larry Johnson on our programs. These are, to put it mildly, extraordinary times, and we have two simultaneous conflicts underway, and we are now seeing increasing, I think, escalation, or at least signs of escalation in relation to both. Firstly, we had yesterday an extraordinary meeting between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and his officials, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was an incredibly tough meeting, apparently. It lasted for 3 hours. It then produced a very remarkable Truth Social post from Trump, which seemed to suggest that there'd been an argument between him and Netanyahu. At least the way I read it was that Netanyahu was pressing Trump to conduct an attack on Iran, and Trump said no. And on Larry's invaluable blog, which is Sonar21, you have a list of all of the people who attended. And one of the things that really struck me is that on the American side, apart from Hegseth, they were all negotiators, Witkoff, Rubio, and Kushner. Whereas on the Israeli side, they all appear to be military and security people. At least that's how it looked to me. So for the moment, at least, it looks as if Trump has drawn back. But then when you get all of these other reports that suggest otherwise, you hear about US carrier deployments and all of that going on. So there is that particular crisis. And then there's the other crisis, which is the crisis over Ukraine. And here it's the other side that is making the big noises. It's Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. He's been speaking day after day, one big interview and press conference after another. And the rhetoric that's coming from him looks extremely tough to me and very, very hardline. He's saying that the Americans went back on what they promised in Anchorage, that the situation is going backwards, that there's no real progress being made in the negotiations. And of course, we see gathering signs of some great offensive beginning in Ukraine. So, Larry, we have this situation. Where are we? The thing that ties all these two conflicts together is the United States. The President of the United States is a key decision maker in both. He says he wants peace in both cases, but it looks as if we have some kind of pressure or drift towards further war in both cases. Has Trump lost control?
Yeah. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play?
Yeah.
We're in that sort of situation.
Yeah.
Let's start with the talks regarding Iran, because I was getting, as I shared with you guys over the weekend, I have a source, we'll call it, who alerted me that, hey, we're starting to round. This is a person that had warned me about June 13th, what was getting ready to happen. And so he says, I'm starting to see basically similar activity. So the United States is clearly ramping up to do something. And then Trump was under enormous pressure as a result of that last round of talks with Iran in Oman. And, you know, one of the indicators of that was Stephen Bryan, who you guys have had on your show. And, you know, you've talked to Stephen. He's a very, he's not a ideological crazy. He is a Zionist. You know, if you can describe that in a positive way, but he's usually very rational and analytical. Boy, he went ballistic over that meeting. And so if he's that whacked out about it, you know that Trump was really under some pressure. So I thought that yesterday's meeting would really have been a planning session for the next round of attacks, or at least coordinating what was going to be an imminent attack. Instead, Trump, to his credit, held the line and said, "No, we're going to talk to Iran one more time." Now, I think part of that may be inspired because from the fact that the United States really can't do anything of significance to Iran militarily, despite, you know, we've got this carrier strike group, but they're staying about 1,000 miles offshore from Iran. And the reason that's a problem is that strike force has Tomahawk cruise missiles. So if they're going to launch those missiles only have 1,000-mile range. So if you're 1,000 miles offshore, it's a little difficult to hit anything of significance. And if they go closer, Iran definitely has the capability to sink those ships. They're not the Houthis. They're far more capable. And so that leaves them with using F-35s to go in and bomb various sites, including destroying the ballistic missiles, which seems to be the new obsession. And I can't emphasize enough how out of touch with reality the senior people are in the United States. I was on a conversation on Tuesday with a retired 3-star admiral. And I can tell you guys off air who it was. And he was saying the most outlandish things about, oh yeah, we're going to fly into Iran and we're going to take out all these missiles. And I kept my mouth shut because he'd been invited as a guest to this conversation. But I wanted to ask him, how did we do with the Houthis? We were trying to take out mobile missile launchers with the Houthis, and we failed. The United States utterly failed. Now they blew some things up, but they were not able to dismantle the Houthi capability. And here's Iran, far more capable, with underground missiles, with systems designed to be hidden, and then once they come out of the ground, they're on mobile launchers. We've never been good at finding them and blowing them up. So, I'm beginning to think that somebody at the Pentagon finally woke up and said, Mr. President, we're not going to be able to do much militarily. It looks good on paper. And then you step back and say, why the sudden obsession, particularly by Israel, with ballistic missiles? Because we were told during the 12-day war, oh, we shot them all down. We shot 95% of them. A few things got through. Well, that was absolutely not true. In fact, Israel took a real beating. Iran fired over 1,000 missiles, and what was again we get the Israelis are like the Ukrainians. Oh, we shot them all down, and by the way, Iran's running out of missiles. I've heard that before. Iran is anything but running out of missiles. In fact, I estimate that Iran probably has a stockpile that in excess of 15,000 minimum. And the reason for that is it's all underground. We don't have, unless you've got good human sources that have penetrated that system that can tell you exactly what's underground, Western intelligence really doesn't have a means to pick up on it. So this is why now the new obsession, we've witnessed Bibi Netanyahu over the years show up at the UN with, you remember his charts, look here, this is the bomb, and Iran's going to have it next week.
Yeah.
Now they want to get rid of the ballistic missiles. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Trump accepts the deal that Iran's willing to make. Iran's willing to say, hey, yeah, you can come and inspect all of the sites that you think we're building nukes, because we're not building it. Only this time they're going to have, I think, increased participation by Russia and China. And listening to Arachi the other day talking with Rick Sanchez, he seemed to indicate that, Iran would be willing also to make some concessions with respect to enrichment of uranium. So that's, Trump can have a nuclear deal with, the irony being it's going to be JCPOA too. He walked away from that. Now he's willing to accept it.
Can we just unpack a few things here? I mean, first of all, if we're talking about an attack on Iran by the United States, if Iran launches counterstrikes against American bases in the Middle East, and they are openly saying that that is what they're going to do, what can the United States do to counter them? I mean, we're talking about ballistic missiles and even missiles that the Iranians say are hypersonic, very high-speed missiles. Yeah. Does the United States have the ability to counter those missiles?
No, and that's what we've seen over and over again in Ukraine with respect to the Russian missiles. And we saw it in the 12-day war. During that 12-day war, the United States deployed the THAAD, the Theater High Altitude Air Defense System, and then also the Patriot missiles, and you had the Iranian Iron Dome. Well, tactically they flooded the zone initially with drones and with some of their older ballistic missiles, and what that ends up doing is depleting the system. It's not like these Patriot missile batteries and THAADs have unlimited supplies of missiles. Once you fire something off, you gotta go with what you have in your inventory, and the United States doesn't have a wide inventory right now, or full warehouses. They've been depleted. So very rapidly, with proper tactics and flooding the zone, Iran can drain their ability to fire back.
Is the United States psychologically ready for a situation where Iranian missiles start impacting on American bases and American casualties start to appear? I mean, is this something that in the United States people can imagine and believe will happen, both at the political level and perhaps at the wider popular level as well?
Well, I know you're a student of the American Civil War, and so I'm sure you recall the attitude in Washington on the eve of the Battle of Bull Run, the first battle, and how we're going to go beat them easily, and everybody rode out the picnic and watched, like it was a Wimbledon tennis match. The self-delusion in the United States about our military capabilities is just completely out of touch with reality. And because when you try to explain this to people, I get shouted down, and you're looked at like you've got three heads on your shoulders. But the fact of the matter is the United States is living with this delusion that, we've got this invincible, powerful military. But when you try to get people to say, okay, let's walk through the practical steps. What are we going to do? So we've got these bases, at least 10 of them scattered out along the Persian Gulf. And they've got some Patriot missiles. Okay, they're good at taking down some drones. But the ballistic missiles that Iran had, they got 8 different types of ballistic missiles. So we don't really have a defense for that, and we've never we've never encountered this kind of threat.
Yeah.
to be candid, and since the end of World War II, where you've got a country like Iran, which is they've got great engineers and they've got a sophisticated industry.
Mhm.
So they're and from launch to striking, it's going to be 5 to 10 minutes maximum. So that is if we get to the point where we attack Iran, Iran is going to decimate these bases. And in the past, Iran always made sure they stayed away. They did not want to get into a fight with the United States. But now I think Iran is being pushed into a corner where they won't have a choice. And as you both have commented over the years, that Iran has always been trying to demonstrate what their capability is, hoping that would dissuade both Israel and the United States from pursuing military action, and it's had the opposite effect. They've assumed that Iran's weak, and that's the most dangerous thing you can do when you dismiss the capabilities of an opponent, assume that they're weak and incompetent, and boy, then you're going to find out the hard way.
Why is the United States so interested, so focused, so single-mindedly obsessed with Iran? I mean, Iran is not in a position to threaten the United States. I mean, there was the enormous historic question of the Iranian hostages siege, which we both no doubt remember very well.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago now. Many younger Americans won't remember it. And the Iran of today is not the same place than it was then. I mean, why is that this overriding focus on Iran, as it doesn't threaten the United States? It is an important regional power in the Middle East, but most Middle Eastern countries now, other than Israel, have actually relatively good relations with it. I mean, its conflict with Saudi Arabia, for example, seems to be in the past.
Yeah.
What is it exactly about Iran that makes the US so antagonistic to it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the so-called hostage issue. It started with the U.S. Embassy, and again, here the way the narrative is spun in the United States, we've been brainwashed. We were basically told that this was an unprovoked attack on diplomats, and I knew a couple of the hostages or the diplomats that had been taken hostage. Ann Swift was one, but back then that's what launched Ted Koppel's career on Nightline, because we had every day this the day 1, day 2, day 10 of the hostage crisis. And look, I just started my academic career at American University in Washington, D.C. And, I must confess, I drove past the Iranian embassy there on Massachusetts Avenue, sits directly across from the British embassy, by the way. And, yelling and protesting against what Iran had done. America has never really been told the truth about Iran and about America's meddling. We construct this narrative that Iran is this irredeemable terrorist state. And yet, when I started finally looking into the facts, you realize that the narrative should be that here is the United States that has done everything in its power to cause harm and damage to the Iranian people over the years. The Iran-Iraq War, which the United States basically encouraged Saddam Hussein to do it, and then supplied him with the chemical precursors used to carry out mustard gas attacks, and the upwards of 500,000 Iranians died in the course of that war. And I've asked some people recently. I said, hey, if Iran killed 500,000 Americans, do you think we'd be chanting death to Iran? Of course we would. But so we act surprised that the Iranians would chant death to America. But it didn't stop there. The United States was hand carrying. I knew Walter Patrick Lang, who's now deceased, but Pat had been the chief of the Middle East division at Defense Intelligence Agency. He hand carried intelligence to the Iraqis and actually helped the Iraqis plan what was a final offensive against Iran. So the United States has had this hostility. And then the issue of terrorism. I really dug into this and was very surprised to find that if, go on to into the AI engines and ask the question, how many of the Iranian proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, how many Israelis have they killed since 1982 in terrorist attacks? The answer, less than 5,000. Now, I don't want to pretend that 5,000 is an inconsequential number, but it pales in comparison to the more than 70,000 Palestinians that have been murdered in the course of the war. So again, and here's Iran, who's been fighting Islamic extremism, the very Islamic extremism that the United States initially claimed attacked us on 9/11. And instead of the United States making a partnership with Iran to combat that, but in Syria was a case in point, we continue to peddle this myth that Iran is the threat. So we've been completely brainwashed, and I don't know how we're going to get over it.
What is the chance of a diplomatic resolution? I mean, I was hearing last week, and I think you were getting even more information last week, that all sorts of people were saying that a decision to attack Iran has already been made, that there was an actual decision to attack Iran, and all the indications seem to support that. Obviously, for some of the reasons you've explained, there seems to have been a pullback, but we have these negotiations, given the hard feelings, these feelings that you've described. I mean, is there any realistic possibility that we can actually come back to a diplomatic resolution? I mean, you said whatever we will get, it will be like the JCPOA. That's going to be very difficult for Trump himself to accept, given that he was the person who tore up the JCPOA. Right. So, I mean, is this a possibility?
No, I do think it's a possibility. If a lot of it hinges, I think, on Susie Wiles, the chief of staff of Trump. If they're taking an honest look at the polling and at Trump's standing, he needs a victory. So that they keep putting the spin out that things are great and we've never been better. But we saw, he suffered another setback yesterday with the Congress, where they voted to rescind tariffs on Canada, and Trump had been pressing, we got to keep the tariffs, and at least 6 Republicans said, no, we're not doing that. So this would give him a chance to say, hey, I've secured made sure that Iran is never going to build a nuclear weapon. Israel's going to be safe from a nuclear attack. He could get that deal. Iran's willing to make that deal. That's what's so crazy about this. But the unknown is you've got this Zionist pressure. And when I talk about Zionism, I'm not talking about Judaism, because we got Christian Zionists. Mike Huckabee is a case in point that are pressing for we got to destroy Iran, and yet the problem, they don't understand the lack of military capability on the part of the United States. We've got we've been besieged by the Air Force and Army Air Corps delusion since World War II. During World War II, there was the thought that the 8th Air Force, along with the British Air Force, we could win the war. All I had to do was drop enough bombs on Europe. Well, that wasn't true. And we saw in Vietnam that, air power doesn't solve everything. We saw it in 2003. We had complete air supremacy over Iraq, and we still had to put troops on the ground to try to bring about a regime change. But now all of a sudden they think magically we can fly some F-35s. And this is, sorry to deviate on this, but have you seen the reports that because of the cutoff of China from rare earth minerals, that the gallium in particular, they're no longer able to build the radars that go into the nose of the F-35. So what they're doing is they're putting gym weights, I mean, literally plates, in the nose cone of these planes.
Yes, I know.
I mean, and yet we're gonna go take out all the missiles in Iran. It's delusional.
Can we turn to the other wall?
Oh,
Because again, we had all of these statements of Lavrov, and well, the sense I'm getting is that the Russians thought that they'd achieved some great breakthrough with the United States in Anchorage, and very interestingly, Lavrov is saying that they actually have a document that Witkoff actually came to Moscow with some kind of written proposal from Trump, which set out what the Americans were proposing and which the Russians, with some qualifications, said in Anchorage that they were accepting. Now, I have great difficulty understanding what this is because I haven't seen any visible sign that the Russians have conceded on anything. But whatever it was that the two sides agreed, the Russians are saying that the Americans have gone back on it, that it's not happening. And they seem to me to be getting increasingly angry. Now, at least Lavrov's comments, one after the other, in a procession like I have never seen, seem to be suggesting to me that they are getting increasingly angry. Is that, I mean, what are your thoughts about
Oh
that?
yeah, no, that was my exact conclusion. We've never seen, we've been following this war now for over 4 years, and we've never seen Lavrov come off with those kinds of public statements, and they're basically the same statement over and over and over. He did it, started with Rick Sanchez last Thursday, then he showed up Monday with BRICS TV, and then the next day with NTV, and then yesterday at the Duma. So and this is not this is not Lavrov on his own.
No.
Yeah, I think he's doing so. He's sending a message,
Yes.
and it's Putin sending the message as well that the negotiations path has changed.
Yes.
And you discussed previously on your show about the issue of the language that had come out, where I had interpreted the word where they said they had a frank discussion with Witkoff and Kushner last go round, and Ray McGovern and I disagreed on with the implications of that, but I think this now demonstrates there's been a definite change in the Russian position. Partly, I think it goes back to the 91 drones that were sent on December 28th to try to attack Putin's official residence in Valdai, and then the U.S. attack on Venezuela and then taking out Maduro. I think they finally reached a stage that the United States has not offered one single concrete concession towards Russia. For example, they could have said, okay, all that property that was confiscated by Barack Obama in December of 2016, we're giving that back. We're gonna have direct flights now between the United States and Russia. None of that, and instead started applying more sanctions and more threats that if anybody buys Russian oil, we're going to charge put more tariffs on you. And I think finally the Russians just said, okay, the talk behind the closed doors with Kushner and Witkoff are meaningless. They don't have the juice to bring about actual substantive change. And I don't think the United States can be trusted personally.
There is something else, and I'm again surprised that people haven't spotted this, and it goes back to that meeting between Putin and Kushner and Witkoff, the one where we're told the meeting was frank, the very point that you made, which is that, of course, over the last couple of weeks, months in fact, we've been hearing in the media across the West about the negotiations about the security guarantees, the security guarantee for Ukraine. And Lavrov is saying, we haven't been consulted about that. Zelensky's talking about some agreement that the Americans and the Ukrainians and the Europeans have made with each other, that he's suggesting there's even a document, but we've never been shown it.
Yeah.
And apparently they weren't even shown that in the meeting between Putin, Wikoff, and Kushner, the one that took place on the 3rd of January. And again, if you go to the Russian readout of that meeting, you read that Putin asked lots of questions. It was all about questions. This is what Ushakov said. And I can't help but think that the questions that were being asked were specifically about this document. I mean, I've been worried that the Americans are they're doing the worst possible thing you can do in negotiations, which is that you have two parties in conflict. You tell each of them what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm worried that this is what the Americans have been doing. And that is a disastrous way to conduct negotiations, especially at this level. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. It is one thing I've been struck by is Lavrov is continuing to return to history about what happened in April of 2022, when there was actually a tentative agreement between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it really a year ago, March, Judge Napolitano and I, along with Maria Nafal, we were sitting at the basically the official residence of the foreign minister. It's a ceremonial house,
yeah.
And Lavrov brought up. He said, "Look," he said, what we signed off on in April. He says that was an agreement the Ukrainians brought to the table. We were willing to accept what they would offer, which would have meant Donetsk and Luhansk would have stayed as part of Ukraine. It wouldn't have been incorporated into Russia.
Oh.
I mean, and he emphasized, we had agreements on how to reduce Ukraine's military force to a level that we would not feel threatened.
Okay.
And that got blown up. So, I mean, he keeps coming back to that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's just his own personal obsession. It is something that the Russians thought that they actually had. I think Putin's plan from the outset was not to militarily defeat Ukraine, but to put enough pressure militarily to bring Ukraine to the table to negotiate, which in fact that worked. It almost succeeded, but they failed to, I think Putin and Lavrov, they failed to calculate on the fact that the United States and Britain would intervene to prevent any such deal from happening. So, and Trump's negotiating style from, I've got a close friend who's actually, met with him several times in very, I'll call it semi-private sessions. He tells you what you want to hear. He does not like confrontation. He doesn't like having to actually fire somebody. That television character where you're fired, that's not him. Mm-hmm. And so I could see with these negotiations, he thought, we got to, we'll tell the Russians what they want, but he's not doing the follow through to actually implement it.
I mean, there is something else, which is this. Does he understand? Does the United States understand how critical Ukraine's actual situation really is? I ask this question because there's been this, I found it very bizarre article in the New York Times, which came out, I think, was it 2 days ago, in which they spoke about how the Russians are about to capture 3 Ukrainian cities, Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and Gulyapolye. Yeah. They might capture them at some point within the next few weeks and months. And if they do, that will put them in a better position. I don't know anybody who follows the war closely and who is close to the actual situation, who is any doubt at all. I mean, it's almost absurd to say this, that in fact, all 3 of these cities fell to the Russians weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, so what does the United States really understand about this war?
Well, the CIA is lying outright lying. And we know that thanks in part, unintentionally, from Seymour Hersh.
Yeah.
Now, look, I've been friends with Cy for 45 years, for God's sake. But he's mad at me right now because he's been writing just some ridiculous crap. But his source, he's accurately reporting what his source is telling him. And these senior CIA personnel are telling him what are outright lies, misrepresentations about what's going on the ground. I mean, such as, oh, the Russian economy is teetering, it's going to collapse, which, you know, you've done an excellent job of reporting on, and I've seen it myself in person. You know, it's anything but collapsing. It's quite strong. And to again persist with this myth that Russia's suffering massive casualties. So when you have your intelligence agency, and I know one of the reasons that's driving this is, and this goes back 10, 11 years, when it used to be that the analysts were on one side of the CIA, literally physically on one side of the building at CIA, and the operations guys and gals were on the other side.
Yeah.
In fact, back in the early 60s, there were literally doors, a wall separating the two sides. When I was there, they'd taken down the wall. You could still see the tracks of the doors. But what happens when you got an operation that's running, this operation, you get promoted according to how well that operation goes. You've got no incentive to come in and say, like with the Contra project, that the Contras were not going to defeat the Sandinistas. Oh, no. You build up the capability. So that's exactly what's going on with Ukraine. 10 years ago, John Brennan brought the analysts into these operation centers. And all of a sudden now, if you're an analyst, you're confronted with the pressure to not do anything or say anything that's going to undermine the project that's underway. And so I think that's one factor that's contributing to this. But the reality is Donald Trump is being told outright lies and not being given the honest, objective picture about what's going on the ground. And so when you're given that kind of bad information, it's no surprise that you continue to make bad policy decisions.
I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. I mean, I think we both remember Vietnam, when there was massive over-reporting of Vietnamese casualties. I don't know whether you remember this too, but during the 1980s, there was over-reporting of Soviet casualties in Afghanistan as well. I have never forgotten that. Again, I mean, I remember the numbers that were being given, and they were about 10 times greater than what turned out to be the actual ones. Now, I accept that, today intelligence gathering is much more effective, one assumes, but still, I mean, given the track record, one should be suspicious. And I would have thought, by the way, that Seymour Hersh, of all people, ought to be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when I went through my analyst training course, was taught by George Allen. George Allen was he had been the senior, the division director for Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He was the one that was presenting the analysis of, and a lot of it provided by Sam Adams, that was disputing what the Pentagon was claiming, that it had the Vietnamese were, North Vietnamese were losing, that they were weak because they'd killed all these Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, and we were on the cusp of victory. And the CIA, the analytical side, George Allen, Sam Adams, were saying, no, that's not true. Now, at that time, they were all still on one side of the building. They were not faced with the direct pressure on a daily basis. But George, I remember him telling with regret, he says, I had two kids that were in high school getting ready to go to college. He said, I needed the job. He said, I was getting calls on a daily basis from McGeorge Bundy, who was the national security advisor. He said he even got calls from Lyndon Johnson saying, why aren't you being a team player?
Yeah.
And so that kind of pressure is still around today.
Yeah, yeah.
The difference, I would disagree with you on the fact that the intelligence collection is better. It's probably worse. Back in the 60s, we had a higher priority on actually getting human sources, where the CIA would actually recruit foreign agents to give us information. Today, most of the CIA activity is relying upon what's called liaison reporting. So we get information from the Ukrainians, because we've got people co-located with them, and they say, "Oh yeah, we've killed X amount of Russians," and so that's what gets reported back at headquarters and put into the intelligence reports without any independent verification. So it's like they're not doing the kind of work that Media Zona is doing in the UK, where they're looking at obituaries and counting up, okay, how many people are actually getting buried. So you're not having that kind of independent attempts to corroborate what you're being told by the Ukrainians.
Where is this all going? Because I do get the sense the Russians are very angry. We've had these meetings, these two meetings in Abu Dhabi. I think their importance has been overstated. I mean, you look at the people who are involved in them. I mean, on the Russian side, they are exclusively technical people. They are not there to do the substantive negotiating work. And people forget that Putin said back in December, when he had his meeting with Kushner and Witkoff then, that if we really do get into proper negotiations, it will be the foreign ministry that will take charge of them. Exactly. And they're not involved at the moment. So, I mean, we're not really in that situation at all. The man who heads the foreign ministry is, of course, Lavrov. He's coming across as being very, very angry. I mean, that's my own sense of this.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, are we going to get negotiations? I mean, is this war going to end in any other way than on the battlefield?
No, I'm with you on that. This is the Russians are willing to have a negotiated settlement, but it's going to be on Russia's terms. And as both of you have commented, you know, in various shows talking about June 2024, June 14th, I believe it was, where Putin laid out what the conditions were. And, you know, since then, he's now intimated that, you know, if Ukraine doesn't take that deal, the next deal is going to be tougher. And that deal will be that Russia will take control of Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, Poltava, and they'll hold another vote. They'll give the people in those regions a chance to vote. Do you want to become part of Russia or not? And if they vote that way, they'll become part. I think Russia will retake Kiev, and I think they will also take Odessa. This is going to be settled on the battlefield, because there is the corruption on the Ukrainian side. I don't know the specific list of names of who's pulling the strings on Zelensky, but Zelensky is not. He's not the political force. He's the actor. He's the highest paid actor in the world, and he's playing a role. But there are other interests behind him that have, you know, profited from this war, and that would like to see it continue. But they're simply going to run out of resources to sustain it. It's just, you know, I had a conversation yesterday with Danny Davis, and, you know, when I talked to him about how long did it take to train somebody to drive a tank, and, you know, you're looking at probably a year from basic training to what they call advanced individual training, then to the actual training to drive the tank. You're looking at a year. Yeah. Well, we don't see any of that training infrastructure in place in Ukraine. And in fact, what you get is a bunch of guys grab you off the street, put you in a uniform, throw a gun in your hand, and shove you off on the front line. What do you know? They have no skill at that point. Yeah. So Ukraine cannot continue to bleed out like this forever. There is a limit. And Russia, by contrast, has been building up its forces and its resources across the board. I think the news that has come out, was it Estonia, that just issued a report detailing, boy, Russia's building 7 million artillery rounds a year, and they're building artillery barrels, and they're not weak at all. They're surpassing anything Ukraine can do. So yeah, this is going to be a military solution. I don't see any diplomatic solution.
Right. Can we finish with what happened in Congress, which is that we had this extraordinary affair with Pam Bondi over the Epstein files. I mean, I have to say that we have this expression, I don't know whether you have it in the US, that if you're in a hole, you stop digging.
Yeah.
I mean, the spectacle of, I mean, she wasn't just digging, she was digging, at a furious rate. My jaw dropped when I watched this. What is going on? Why don't the administration, the people get this, that one, this is something that people care about, and secondly, that these answers that they're coming up with are so impossibly lame that they simply cannot be taken seriously?
Yeah, if you're going to lie, at least be good at it, and she's not good at it. With the same expression, we call it the first rule of crisis management. When you're in a hole, stop digging. This Jeffrey Epstein affair, it is a dark chapter, and I think one of the reasons there's been such an effort by the Trump administration to cover it up, one entails Epstein's ties to the CIA. So it was clear he was working as an intelligence asset of Mossad, but he also had relations with the CIA that date back to the whole Iran-Contra affair. So there's no denying that. But then the fact that there are so many prominent people embroiled or implicated in these the trafficking, the sex with underage women, and then even some darker things that are coming out, which it just defy people's imagination. And here was Bondi, initially said, "Oh yeah, we got the list, we're reviewing it," and then kind of, "Oh, there's no list," and now, of course, there's a list. Well, it's not so much a list. What there is all of these documents which name specific individuals by accusers, the women who claimed that they were trafficked and abused. They provided depositions and other testimony. I know that Ryan Dawson was one of the first ones to compile the list, and he did it the old-fashioned way. He just went back to the court transcripts and pulled out the names that way. So they're trying to pretend that there's nothing there. But Trump is implicated in this. They keep saying, "Oh, there's no evidence that Trump was involved with some of the activities," but there's no denying the fact that Melania Trump, a picture just came out of this file of her and Ghislaine Maxwell back in 2002. They were friends, and reportedly Trump met Melania via Epstein. So, and then Epstein, when is he arrested and incarcerated? While Donald Trump is president. And when is he, I believe he was killed in prison, or, I think he was killed. And at who did it? There we get off into speculation, but this has been completely botched. It's not going away. And Bondi isn't incompetent. She has failed to follow through on any of the promises that Trump made in his campaign. And instead, John Brennan and Jim Clapper ought to be in handcuffs and sitting in a courtroom being tried, but they haven't put a glove on them.
I just wanted to quickly say I agree about incompetence. I mean, this affair could have been handled in a completely different way, which would still have kept most of the really important things away from the public. But you could have found various people you wanted to prosecute, and you could have done all kinds of things, and you could have given the appearance of action, and that would have probably satisfied enough people to damp the scandal down. Instead, they tried to close it completely, and now it's blown up in their faces. We should be grateful for their incompetence,
Oh,
because
yeah.
we now see what's happened. Anyway, Larry, unless there's anything else you wanted to say, this is where I'm going to finish my questions. If you could stay a little while, because I'm sure Alex has some questions for you. But what I wanted to say is thank you very much. And
Hey, well,
thank
thank
you
you.
for
Yeah,
answering,
I can hang
answering my
out for a bit.
questions so well.
All right, Larry, we have some questions for you. From Reaper Actuel, are China and Russia supplying to Iran? There's been a lot of fake news on this topic over the past few years. Is there any hard evidence this time?
Yeah, I think there is. And you know what's? Let's go back to when Trump walked away from the JCPOA. That was 2018. The next year, Russia, China started doing joint naval military exercises with Iran. I don't think that was just a coincidence. And they've done that annually every year in February/March. So you've got right now this military cooperation with this exercise that's going to take place in a couple of weeks. So you've got Chinese and Russian warships headed to the area. The Chinese have already deployed a spy ship that's sailing behind the Abraham Lincoln, the carrier, collecting information. And I believe the reports that China has deployed a radar, what's called a 3D radar, that it has a range of going out 700 kilometers. So that has been deployed. We had the reports that during this attempted color revolution that was launched on December 28th and continued through January 10th, that the shutdown of the internet and the shutdown of the Starlink terminals, that was made possible by Chinese assistance. In fact, I'm struck by the Chinese really seem to be more active in trying to help Iran than Russia, and Russia is trying to help Iran. I'm not suggesting Russia's not doing anything, but the Chinese have really they're invested in this in a way that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
From Ronald B, it's 100% Trump's fault. He's being given false information. Tulsi Gabbard's job is to coordinate and verify intelligence, and Trump sidelined her.
Yeah,
Trump did sideline her. Huh?
Yeah, this is. I mean, we can excuse that Trump is some of the things he does and believes are because he's being lied to, but the system's broken. John Ratcliffe is, I think, deliberately defying Tulsi Gabbard, and I don't think Tulsi's actually got, she doesn't have the power to corral him. And in fact, let me give just an example. Did you wonder why J.D. Vance just recently visited Armenia and Azerbaijan? I mean, I don't think we've ever had in the last 100 years a situation where a president or vice president went to either of those countries. And then you look back and say, why was Donald Trump hosting Pashinyan and Aliyev a year ago on peace talks? Because if Trump, if you'd asked him to point out Armenia and Azerbaijan on a map, he wouldn't be able to find it. So what these are CIA projects, I guarantee you. The CIA has, this goes back to a covert finding of some sort that was signed off on, but to use Armenia and Azerbaijan as, if you will, launch platforms for both destabilizing Russia, destabilizing Iran. But just the fact that you've got this other, I'll call it a deep state agenda that is still in place and it's operating, and Trump's not in control of it at all. And just this, like I said, I offer circumstantial evidence of it by the fact that here's J.D. Vance going to both Armenia and Azerbaijan this week before heading off to the Olympics. That people should be going, what's that about?
Very true. Matthew says, what happens in 2027, 28, 29, 30 when the EU says it's going to war with Russia? Do they enter?
I with what? I don't mean to be insulting to Europe, but they're now the gang that couldn't shoot straight. They've we've seen in the case of the United Kingdom trying to get an aircraft carrier out of harbor and put it to sea. They've had trouble with that. There are in fact, I think I know that you two talked about it yesterday. That joint fighter project that was supposed to be underway between Germany and France, that's completely collapsed.
Yeah.
And as you all commented, Germany, despite its its industrious status as an industrial power, formerly industrial power, doesn't have the ability to produce a fifth generation fighter. So it's just the world is changing, and the world in which Europe once dominated has moved on, and we're willing. And this has been the theme of what Lavrov's talking about: this multipolarity, this new world that's emerging with Russia, China, India. That's where all the wealth is going, and the actual, I think we're going to see a military dimension out of that eventually, because they're not going to continue to be pushed around or threatened by the West.
Elza asks, the collective West claims that Russia's red line is a bluff. It looks to me like NATO's Article 5 is a bigger bluff.
Yeah. Well, getting all the governments to come together Hungary's legislature has to meet. I guess each government has to make a decision. Okay, yeah, we're going to go to war. Good luck getting everybody to agree to that. I don't see Orban in Hungary or Fico signing on to something like that. So, right now, Article 5 is just an idle threat.
Thomas Peterson asks, given Callas' latest statements, Larry, do you think Brussels is living in a separate ideological reality, or are they knowingly sacrificing Ukraine?
No, I think it's the former. Or they refuse to admit that they're knowingly sacrificing Ukraine. They've really convinced themselves, and when you're told over and over that Russia is losing, that Russia is going to collapse any minute now, we have historical examples. There was that painter from Vienna that created a lot of mayhem more than 80 years ago. That when he was locked in his bunker, he actually thought he was commanding armies that they didn't exist, but he thought they were, moving around, and he's giving orders. So, and we saw it, in Iraq when the United States invaded in 2003. Baghdad Bob became infamous for, there are no tanks here. So it's, it sounds impossible, but that, people who are well educated, and Kaya Kallas is, she's gone to at least university, and yet to be this out of touch with reality, it's mind numbing.
Ronald B says, if Iran sinks a U.S. aircraft carrier, will it make the U.S. pull back, or will it let the neocons have free reign?
No, it's going to be shocking, and I think that's a very serious risk of what could happen out of this conflict. And because then you have to step back and say, what does the United States do? Send more planes to try to drop bombs? Again, we don't have unlimited inventory. We're not sitting with factories blazing away 24/7 and turning out these munitions. It's going to be a crisis, because Trump has sold it as, hey, we're the greatest military in the world. Nobody's better than us. And yet they say that, and then look back at Operation Rough Rider last March, where the United States sent the Navy sent two carrier strike groups, not one, two, sent 5 destroyers and 4 destroyers, 1 cruiser into the Red Sea, and with a specific mission of securing freedom of navigation, that any ship that wanted to sail to Israel could do so without fear of being shot or sunk. And after 7 weeks, with the full power of the U.S. military bombing inside Yemen, the United States declared victory and pulled out because we couldn't stop the Houthis. And yet these same people think that we're going to crush Iran. I mean, it's crazy talk. But it's because people watch too many Hollywood movies, and they don't understand the nuts and bolts of what it means to actually have to get a plane up in the air and then find a mobile missile somewhere on the ground. We demonstrated it wasn't. We failed to do it in 2003, looking for Scuds in Iraq, and the same back in 1990 during the first Gulf War. And that's why we lost 7 Predator MQ-9 Reaper drones over that 7-week period, starting on March 1st, because those drones would fly out looking for a mobile missile launcher, and then if they spied it, they would be able to launch a harm missile. 7 of those got shot down by the Houthis, and they had $35 million a piece. We were rapidly up over like $250 million in losses. So how are we going to do that in Iran when Iran is, some physically like 9 times the size of Yemen, and it's got active air defense? People haven't thought this through.
Twilight says regime change is not possible without actual boots on the ground in a country the size of Iran. It took 300,000 soldiers to take Iraq, a small country.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Sparky says, Larry, if Israel uses the Samson option, destroying their present location, will Patagonia be their new promised land?
Yeah. Well, I lived in Argentina for a year, so I like, Patagonia is not a bad place, but no, this is what is telling. The pressure to get rid of ballistic missiles from Iran lets you know how much damage was actually done during that 12-day war, because the Israelis through censorship insisted, it didn't lay a glove on us. Okay, well, if that's true, then why do you need to get rid of the ballistic missiles? If your air defense systems are so capable of shooting down everything, why care? Because the exact opposite was the truth. What they discovered is that Iran could rapidly deplete the air defense capabilities of both the U.S. and Israel, and then we're completely vulnerable to hypersonic missiles, the more advanced missiles they have. And there's not an easy military fix to that.
From True Lies, hi guys, are the British involved in the naval maneuvers?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think they, the last thing I heard about the British Navy in the Persian Gulf was when 2 of the ships collided. So the once storied naval power of Great Britain is no longer. That's history.
There's no word of our involvement in London. I haven't seen anything to suggest that we are. And it's for exactly the reason that Larry says. I don't think we're in a position to be.
Wife's Wandering asks, fast forward a decade, where do you guys see the collective West compared to the rest of the globe?
Outside looking in, or at least, China, Russia, India, they have a genuine new outlook and approach to the world. It's not one of who do we dominate, who do we control. It is a genuine how can we build more collaborative efforts. And the United States and to a lesser extent the UK, they're not going to go quietly into that dark night. They're trying desperately to hang on to control. But what we're seeing, and we didn't even talk much about the economic volatility in the markets, particularly in gold and silver markets right now. But these are all China and Russia are moving away from the U.S. control of using treasuries to control the world. And as the U.S. no longer is able to control things, the economic strength already of the BRICS countries outpaces the G7. And that's it's a transformation in the last 10 years. That trend is going to continue. Economic opportunity is in the global South, and it's with Russia and China. It's not in the West. And so I think the West is going to pass through a pretty dark period in terms of economics, as the currencies collapse, and the industrial power of these countries has they've lapsed.
China Expert Future asks, is Iran capable of hitting an aircraft carrier?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. The Houthis actually hit one of the carriers and caused some damage in March. Iran has much more capable missiles, and they've already had drones flying by, and those drones can be used to target missiles.
Paul Walker asks, tank driver training in the UK, including road, night, cross-country, takes 2 weeks, ex-armored corps. That includes maintenance, but the entire crew works on. Thanks, Paul, for that. From Elza, Larry, Trump can't say Azerbaijan, but he invented the discombobulator. What's your professional opinion on that weapon? Why didn't Russia steal it?
Yeah, no, this technology has actually been around for a while. It's a sound wave technology. It was called less than lethal. It described a whole category of what are called less than lethal weapons, and the sound waves are used to cause nausea and disorientation. So that's not new. That's been around.
A. Lorag asks, is the CIA launching all covert projects simultaneously around the world, thinking it will stop or slow down BRICS? If so, will those projects burn out and the CIA become irrelevant at some point?
I would argue the CIA is already on the road to being irrelevant. I would not surprise me that a finding has been signed off on to try to destabilize BRICS, or specifically to go after countries like Brazil to try to sow division. But the economics of it are so powerful, particularly with what China and Russia are doing in their leadership role, and it's set in motion. We're witnessing the creation of a new economic order, and none of us were around for the Bretton Woods regime, but that whole economic system that was constructed in the wake of World War II, it took about 3 to 4 years for that all to come together. It wasn't just one decision and one meeting. And that's the same thing we're seeing right now with BRICS, that compare where they were even 2 years ago to where they are now. Mm-hmm. And with China building up gold reserves and trading on the yuan, it is, all of a sudden the preeminence of the dollar is definitely challenged. And so like I said, this new economic world is unfolding. I mean, what the top, China has the top 5 banks, 4 of them are Chinese. Mm-hmm. So this era where the West was in control of the world, it's over. And there is frustration that comes with that. But the reality is, and we've seen some hints of it in the Sahel in Africa. Once in Mali and Niger, once they kick the French out, all of a sudden their economies are doing better because they're basically not being raped.
From Linda, what do you mean by Trump is not in control? His name is mentioned in the Epstein files for over 1 million times. Do you still have faith in him?
No, I have no faith in Donald Trump. But he's not in full control of the government, is what I meant by that. There are other, again, he is a political force, but he's increasingly, I think, out of touch with what's going on. He's convinced himself that America is doing quite well, and yet, militarily, he's going to find out that we've got real limitations on our power.
From Zariel, Larry, is it the same as LRAD or not?
What does he mean by that?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Come on, Chris.
No. Anyway,
I
Madeline,
love Zariel, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous guy.
Madeline, thank you for that. Super chat asks, question for anyone with data. Has India stopped buying Russian oil? I have searched, cannot find a definitive answer. Times of India is being diplomatic. Indians seem to be diplomatic. Cannot find any trades. Only knowledge, not speculation, please.
Yeah. I can't say, oh, I've got solid data. I can show you the invoice. But I don't think India is going to stop buying oil from Russia. Again, this is the other fantasy that the United States pursues, that they think if we simply cut off Russia's ability to sell oil, that Russia's economy is going to collapse. And it's actually become a less important part of the Russian economy over the last 10 years, not a more important part.
From Miss Texas G, question: what is the purpose of the Iranians placing mounds of dirt at the entrance of the nuclear plants? Were they expecting special U.S. ground troops near the facility?
No, I think I've seen the photographs, but I'm not sure why they're doing that.
From and a couple of more, Larry, from Ronald B, what would Israel lose by doing what it had to do to make peace with all its neighbors, including the Palestinians?
Well, that if they were rational, there is a way to live in peace with these other countries. But the problem is it's the Zionist ideology, which maintains that they have a divine right to control land, and that anybody who's not part of that tribe are considered evil and are entitled to be destroyed. I mean, it really is. It's a perverse mentality, and the fact that there are so many Christians that embrace that as well is I find very troubling. But the Israelis of old that were willing to negotiate, they're gone. They're in the throes of these ideologues right now.
Zizolix asks, what if the U.S. uses nuclear weapons as a military solution against Iran?
Yeah, they're not a solution. That's, again, I think that's where people over exaggerate. I mean, for people who are under, in the target area, yeah, horrific, and kill millions. But it doesn't blanket the entire country. Yeah, I mean, Iran's a big place, and the United States is not going to get to use nukes, and with Russia and China sitting by saying, "Oh well, no big deal." No, this is that would be it would be a nightmare if anyone ventured into that, including Israel, because it's not going to fix it. We got this mentality that we think if we just kill enough people, or if we kill the right people, we'll solve the problems, and that's never worked out. We got rid of Bashar al-Assad. Oh, that fixed Syria, didn't it? Just the opposite. We kill Saddam Hussein, kill Muammar Gaddafi, go back to Vietnam, Diem. So this mindset, this belief that if we just kill enough people, we can solve the problem. And here's Trump killing guys in the Caribbean who are in boats, allegedly carrying drugs. Again, this kind of killing doesn't bring peace. It doesn't bring a solution. And that's the one mentality I would love to try to change.
Duapskanda says the U.S. has no necessity to end the war. Russia is being drained and Europe is buying U.S. weapons. Why should the U.S. want to bring an end to it? And Europe is buying U.S. energy as well.
Well, hopefully Europe didn't pay up front for weapons that it's not going to receive for a long while, because with the cutoff of rare earth minerals, the U.S. ability to produce those weapons is significantly hindered. And they're not bleeding out Russia. Just the opposite has happened. It has been, Russia has awakened from a dream in which in the past they thought their future lay with the West. And if only they would, dress the right way or say the right things, or that the West would like them. And I'm in the Sergey Karaganov camp. He told me before, he said, I used to be a sort of a Europhile, but no more. Our future is in the East. Mm-hmm. And I think once Russia awakened to that, it's found it's got its mojo back, basically.
Klaus says, I'm looking forward to the day when you three are invited into the mainstream media.
Yeah,
you're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, thank you for that. John Roberts, USA, says, if Russia does make big gains in Ukraine this year, won't this frighten Europe? Will the fear be enough to push Germany to get its own nuclear bomb?
No. Russia's made it clear. They have zero interest in invading Europe. Lavrov has made that point repeatedly over the last week. Putin has also made that point in recent speeches. What is there in Europe that Russia would need? Nothing. And they don't need extra territory. Good Lord, they've already got 11 time zones worth of territory. They don't need to add one more. Yeah, this is a red herring. That's always ginned up is to justify the expenses that go to the defense industries. That's really where the perverse influence comes, that these various defense industries and throughout Europe and the United States, they've got to be fed. And the only way you get fed is you got to create an enemy to justify spending, what's going to be $1.5 trillion in the United States. Incredible.
All right, two more, and we'll let Larry go. Two more from Raphael. Canadian PM is standing up to Trump. China president is standing up to Trump. Why is Putin allowed by the Russian people to not stand up to Trump? I'm being a little more polite than what Raphael said. Why is Putin not being allowed by Russia to stand up to Trump? Is the question.
Well, actually, I think Putin wisely has been trying to avoid a confrontation with the United States, and to that end, he's tried to work things out diplomatically. However, I think, as we talked about earlier, Russia has now come to sort of a watershed moment, and is recalibrating the relationship with Trump and with the United States. That they recognize that Trump doesn't have the power or the vision to actually achieve a genuine diplomatic solution. And so Russia they're going to go their own way, and they're going to pursue their priorities. And that's why Lavrov, I believe, is out there saying what he's been saying over the last week at the direction of Putin. Yeah. And instead of Putin putting himself out there, he's let Lavrov do it.
Can I just quickly make one, I think, absolutely obvious one? Three leaders are mentioned: Carney, Xi, and Putin. Of those three, only one of them is actually involved in a war in which the United States is on the other side, in effect, is a proxy. Now, that surely is a sign that Putin and Russia are standing up to the United States. They're actually fighting them. I mean, they may be fighting them through the proxy, but they are physically fighting them. China is not. Canada obviously is not. This constant theme about Putin being weak, I know where it comes from. It comes from the fact that he is very open to negotiations with the Americans. But objectively, there is no basis to it.
Yeah.
Russell Hall says, is it possible that Trump is being given drugs to make him compliant? It seems like he jumps from stance to stance based on who recently advises him.
There are two Donald Trumps. And I said, my friend who's had several meetings with him over the last 18 months says the Donald Trump you see if you're in a room with like 3 or 4 of you with Trump, completely different person, both in how he talks and even in some of his decision making. My friend was not suggesting that Trump is some sort of brilliant genius behind closed doors, but it is he's a strange person. He's not normal, but he is. I don't think he's on drugs, but I do think he's starting to suffer some of the effects of being 80 years old or close to 80. You start slipping, as we saw with Joe Biden. And one of the things that's an early indicator of dementia is confabulation, where you say things that you genuinely believe are really true, but they're not true, such as he stopped 8 wars. He really believes that. It's not true, but he's got himself convinced that that's the fact.
Yeah. One final question for both of you, and then we'll let you go, Larry. From Moon Dragon, when do you think the Ukraine war will end?
I think there's a legitimate chance that Russia's going to push to end it by September.
I would agree with that. If not this year, not by this autumn, then 2027 at the latest.
Yeah.
All right. One and only, Larry Johnson.
Gentlemen,
so much for joining us, Larry.
Hey, it's always an honor to be with you guys. You guys are legends.
Larry,
thank you.
Where can people follow your work?
Sonar21.com. Come there, and we'll try to write something every day.
Definitely check out Sonar 21. Fantastic publication. The fantastic Larry Johnson. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.